It's 5 o'clock, so we'll call the meeting to order. Would everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next we'll have a roll call, Jason.
Sarah Sarda.
Here.
Terry Crandall.
Here.
Kathy Greenaway.
Here.
Franny Kiefer.
Here.
Jill Sternquist.
Here. A quorum has been determined. Next we have approval of agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda before us.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Roll call, Jason.
Greenaway.
Yes.
Kiefer.
Yes.
Crandall.
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes.
Sternquist.
Yes. Any direct or indirect conflicts of interest to disclose? Next, public comment. We will have a Q&A session at the end for anyone that has any comments. So we'll move on to the presentation.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Valerie. Excuse me. My name is Valerie Peterson with Wold Architects and Engineers, and I'm here with Coke Hazard Architects to present with you an undertaking that the board has initiated regarding the future of Yankton School District and really what the community would like to see and what resonates with the community. So tonight, I would like to present with you that community task force recommendation. So tonight, what we hope to go over is where this all began. It did not begin with last May when the board decided to put together a community task force. It really began years earlier with establishing the Yankton Schools Forward 2024 plan. Then it evolved into the community task force. So tonight, what I'd like to present with you is the items that was reviewed with this task force group, which includes some of the background information such as enrollment and capacity, some educational adequacy, and all of the takeaways that the community task force had with that. And then ultimately the meat and the potatoes of the presentation is really that recommendation that was developed by the task force and including our next steps. So to start with, I'm not sure, Dr. Kindle, would you like to kind of begin with some statements?
I would, thank you. So, as Val mentioned, that we have a task force that was put together, and she'll talk a little bit more about that and the work of the task force. But what I'd like for everybody to remember is that the reason we put together a task force is because when we put together our Forward 2024 strategic plan, prior to that, we had sought community input to find out what are the priorities of the people in our community, our parents, our community members, our business people, and anybody else that participated in the survey. We had over 1,000 people take the survey to give us direction in our 2024 plan. And one of the main pieces or main focuses that came out of the survey was that people wanted us to take a look at our facilities. And in particular, they wanted us to take a look at our elementary school facilities and with an emphasis on an early childhood development center. So that is really what brought us here tonight and the past several meetings that we've had with this task force. And as you can see on the screen above here, there were also some more specific goals that came out of that. And I'm not going to read those because you can see them in front of you, but they really focus around our elementary school facilities and again an early childhood development center. And so what we're doing here tonight is because of what you asked us to do in our survey that we took, which helped put together our strategic plan, which we have done a great job of following. And this is just another piece of that plan that we need to move forward with. And we're going to do that because that's what you've asked us to do. So again, tonight we're going to go through a recommendation from the committee, and I just want to thank all of the committee members that took part in this process. We're not done yet. We have this meeting, we have a community meeting that Val will mention here in a little bit, and then we have another school board meeting for which they will decide how they want to move forward with, and that will be here in about a month or so. So I'll turn it back to Val.
Thank you. So we had over 30 voices contributing into the task force process. A lot of the main goal of the task force was really to understand and to come to a conclusion where everybody at least agreed upon the conclusion. We used the word consensus during the process, so that even though if the option was maybe not what one individual came up with, they understood how the rest of the group got there and understood how it was supporting the strategic plan of Yankton and what is best for the future of Yankton. So this is the list of our community task force members, and this group was also supported by the elementary school principals and some of the district administration. They were there as resources to help explain some of the how we do it, why we do it, and some of the background information that not every parent or community member really understands within the internal workings of a school district. I want to go over the charge statement that the board did approve when facilitating or initiating this community task force. So the charge of this community task force was to develop and update a comprehensive long-range elementary school plan with one or more scenarios to be recommended to the board that best serves the district's educational goals and strategic vision, be fiscally attainable and responsible, accommodate the district's preschool through 5th grade enrollment, anticipate the needs for the next 10 years, and honor established community partnerships. All of this is to recommend the optimal use of facilities, accommodate projected enrollment, and support educational delivery as part of the recommendation. So some of the items we're going to go through tonight will include the enrollment, the capacity, and the educational delivery that the group studied that helped develop their recommendation to this board. In the end, the outcome of the task force was to provide a long-range plan specific to our preschool, early childhood, and elementary schools to accommodate the future for Yankton School District. We did this over the course of 7 meetings that basically started out with reviewing the data, understanding the facts of the district, and then we worked into some of what is our true desire, what do we really believe in. We called these criteria statements that we will share with you tonight. That helped us formulate some options. Those options were then evaluated against the criteria, and sometimes new options were developed once we had to see an option in front of us and explore it. And tonight we are here at our board meeting with this initial draft recommendation presentation. And as Dr. Kindle indicated, this is not our last stop. There is going to be a community open house that is right now scheduled for April 19th. And here we are in our overall timeline. So we began this work last summer, reviewing some of your facility conditions, the actual condition of the building themselves. And that was presented to you back in October. And then we started also over the course of the summer and early fall, we really dove into how are your facilities being used from an educational standpoint. And this other data is what defined the needs for the group. It's that enrollment, the capacity, and that educational adequacy. This is the information that's really the backbone of the criteria that was developed, of which the task force recommendation was built on. So next we want to go through what we learned. So what we learned is from a kindergarten through 5th grade standpoint, your historical growth has been stable. However, you are projected to have growth. We also know that on average, the district captures over 95% of the births in Yankton County, and that's a really, really high rate. So that's really good news. That means people are choosing to come to your school district. When we start looking at our Preschool Needs, we will see that in the last 15 years since preschool has begun, it has grown over 400%. In the last 5 years alone, it's doubled. So some of this growth has occurred after the district removed the barrier and provided tuition-free preschool starting in January of 2018. However, preschool has not only been supported by the district, but also the task force voices did believe that that is something that the district should continue to support.
Val, can I add a comment in here real quick? So while we're talking about the preschool enrollment, I think it's also important to note that you can see the growth on the chart on the screen above you, and those that are watching online, you can see it as well. In addition to this, down at Webster Elementary School, because of the enrollment growth that we've had down there in our early childhood programs, we had to move our music classes to the gym, and so to free up space. And then, of course, I think we've shared this with the public that our high school buildings trades class, in the meantime, built a new home for our music program, which is on site out by the playground at Webster Elementary School. So we've tried to take care of some of those needs, but those happen pretty quickly. And I think we did a really good job of reacting to the growth needs, but we've got more growth, as Val has indicated, and we need to do something about that.
The green line also represents that as your programming is growing, you are providing more classrooms. So the green line represents the number of classrooms or sections that you are allocating to preschool. So you are growing those sections to support the demand from the community for preschool. This chart is for junior K, and junior K has also been growing. It's your highest, your most enrolled students for junior K in the history. So again, another service that the district is providing that is being supported from the community and parents and is thought of to be continued. Next, we wanted to review what is the capacity. So we know that Beetle and Lincoln are 3-section buildings. Stewart is a 2-section building. And by sections, what I mean is 1 section means it's 1 classroom per grade. So a 3-section building means there's 3 classrooms of kindergarten, 3 classrooms of first grade, 3 classrooms of second grade, and so on. So Stewart is 2-section. However, Stewart supports the early childhood special education within their building. Webster is predominantly your kind of early childhood, your preschool and your junior K, and it only has 1 section of K through 5. So there's just 1 classroom of kindergarten, 1 classroom of first grade, and so on. So what this also shows is that your facilities are operating at a 98% of capacity. Your facilities are full. Getting at 100% capacity is frankly nearly impossible, because that would have to assume that you have exactly the class limit in every grade. So, which we all know that kids don't come in perfect buckets to fill the classroom size per that ratio, but 98% is very high, and what that means is it is causing some stress on scheduling and essentially the space where services can be provided. It also likely means that consideration of a 10th section of K through 5 in your future it should be strongly considered. So some of our takeaways when it comes to capacity is that your K-5 capacity over the recent years is supporting, your K-5 capacity has taken the hit by supporting your growing preschool and your junior K rooms, which is what Dr. Kindle alluded to. Webster once had more than 1 section of K through 5 in their building, but since the preschool programming and the junior K programming has been growing, they have reduced down to 1 section. Again, your K-5 capacity is 98% full, which is causing some stress on your scheduling and your program offering. There's almost 0 rooms that are open for some of your special events, programs, and staff support areas. It's difficult to dedicate space for special ed and student support. And the task force believes that early childhood programs can attract families to Yankton school districts, and they continue to support those early childhood programs. So next we started to talk about the educational adequacy. You guys are offering great programs here at Yankton, and it's really, are those programs and services being offered in a facility environment that is suitable for them? So it has nothing to do with how the programs are being delivered, it's where is the student or that staff member seating when providing services. So we did this through multiple meetings with elementary school principals. We also engaged the staff in a survey to harness some feedback, to identify where barriers present themselves, again, from that facility standpoint. So what we learned, the first question was, do your facilities support the educational delivery of special programming and the curriculum required? Your classrooms are properly sized for the number of students they have. However, from the entire building standpoint, your buildings are small. Your buildings were built in an era where programs as robust as special education are now today, and providing other support services such as counseling, or having some outside and inside psych services, ELL, English language learners, those programs were not around when your buildings were constructed. So from that standpoint, your buildings are very small in today's educational delivery modeling. Some of the comments we had is space for large group learning and assembling by grade level. Oftentimes this may be done in a gym. However, your gym's being double duty at all but Stewart, but your other 3 elementary schools, your gym is double duty for cafeteria. So that puts on a limitation for scheduling some large assemblies. Some additional space for de-escalation rooms and really providing the student a space where they can go to that is right for their moment of time. And preschool and junior K special education, preschool, ages 3 and 4 special education is not being delivered with their peers at Webster. This was something that the task force really supported, that our early childhood special education services should be delivered in the same environment as the rest of the early childhood learners and students. Your buildings are deficient in that student support area and special ed spaces that are part of today's expectation in educational delivery. So some of these items, like I said, are happening in less than ideal locations, such as hallways or workrooms or copy rooms, or just not where the teachers' manipulatives need to be so that they can provide that session with the student. To talk a little bit about these special services, I thought I would just clarify the categories they fall under. So in addition to the general education, the follow special programming is what is being offered at your elementary schools. These are some of the terms and categories, just so you're aware of them, because we will go through some of these as the presentation progresses. So our specialists are our music, gym, and library. Our student support includes English language learners, title, school counseling, outside counselor, and other outside services. And then our special education will include resource rooms, learning centers, self-contained, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech and language. So next we ask the question, are there areas where the facility could support ongoing practices? There's small group rooms would be highly used, and these small group rooms would also alleviate some of the pressure of those student support services and small special ed group work. It could also support some small staff collaboration, as well as meetings with parents for IEPs. In addition to that, having a space where teachers can collaborate and have staff meetings was also desired. There were ideas where the group supports center-based learning centers, but would like to decentralize special ed within its facility. So the group supports that having a learning center would be understandable to have it at a single site, but within a building itself, special ed should be more dispersed and allow the student to feel more inclusive in their environment, and you'll see that in some of the criteria that was developed by the task force. And then another item that popped up a few times was it would be ideal if the nurse office could be better located next to the reception, since there is not a full-time nurse, and that the reception often acts as backup for that. Next, we talked about how do we do business today and how does it differ from our peer buildings. So a little bit about the equity piece. So the type of space for special ed and student support services is not equitable between the buildings. Some buildings have a little bit more room and can provide a little better space. Other buildings are more stressed on that space. And really 3 out of 4 buildings do not have space for makerspace. And makerspace is part of your strategic vision to provide actual space and programming for that in your elementary schools. And the last question we asked is, what do we need to improve? What do we need for function and use? A lot of conversation was learned about media centers. You have some pretty traditional libraries, and a lot of the evolution throughout, throughout the schools is that libraries are a bit traditional, and that really we should be looking more towards a media center, a media commons aspect, where students can learn to go there to investigate, to research, then to create and even demonstrate or present. It really should be a hub for lifelong learning and research skills, is a quote from one member. So some of the takeaways are, is if we were to correct some of your deficiencies just to provide a makerspace at 3 of your facilities, and then also to correct to provide adequate space for your student support and your special ed services, that generally takes off 2 classrooms offline from your elementary schools. And what that does is it puts you over capacity. So that 98% that was earlier in the presentation would now be at 113%. So as I mentioned, you are tight on space as it is today, and if we wanted to achieve some of those district initiatives and goals, and specifically around makerspaces and special programming, you would really be in a crunch for space. So our biggest takeaways is your enrollment is growing. You already have capacity pressure without considering supporting your educational initiatives of the district. And your facilities don't fully support the current educational practices and goals established by the district. I want to pause and see if there's any questions. And with that, I would like to invite up one of our community task force members, Ron Birch, so he could share a few comments on what he's learned throughout the process.
Good evening. If you reviewed the members that make up the committee at this time, the task force, you'll note that young and old and middle-aged. I represent Jan and myself. We're kind of on that older end, but I think that's good. And we had younger people that were part of this, and I think the makeup of the committee was excellent. A lot of give and take through those 7 meetings. I think all of us were not only interested, but dedicated to serving on the committee because of its importance. We were encouraged as committee members to go to those 4 facilities. And as an old school board member, I could sit back and say, well, I've been in those places. We had 2 children go through the system and so on. But we made a point to go to each building, and we were very impressed with, first of all, the administration of the principals in those buildings, the teachers and so on. We came away from those meetings saying, there was education going on, and kids were happy. We were really impressed with the give and take between not only the principals and the students, but teachers and the students. It was a happy, positive thing. So that was very positive. Now, there were some negative things, and that Val's already gone through this in some detail. Cramped conditions. I think in each building there was give and take about using this room, using this hallway. There was things for cleaning during the COVID that had to be taken care of. So there was some negative things there about cramped situations. Webster definitely is a cramped situation. In our opinion, definitely needs some changes to eliminate that, and Beetle has some drawbacks, so on and so forth. But facilities are a very important part of this. As an old school board member and as a downtown businessman, facilities attract people. Now, it's secondary to good teachers. I don't want to overlap that fact that good teachers are the primary, but good facilities are necessary. And I think those of us on this committee, looked at it in that way. Good facilities draw families, particularly young families, to come to Yankton. And we're in a position where the facilities are somewhat outdated. They're too small, Webster particularly. Beetle's got some problems because of the divisions of the way that building's made up. But in closing, I just want to make sure that the board understands that this committee was not just there to eat cookies and drink coffee. We studied what was going on and where we are at this particular time. And I commend the administration to keep following through on that survey that Dr. Kindle mentioned earlier. We need to move forward and we need to get something done. And of course, that comes back to the board. We can recommend, you people need to take into consideration things that are presented this evening and discussion on it. But, I think for the betterment of education and betterment of the community, changes need to be made, particularly at Webster, or with Webster, I should say. It's in a flood zone, and that creates some additional problems. But with that, I'll sit down. Thank you.
Okay, so without further ado, we'll talk a little bit about the task force recommendation. So we're really excited to present this recommendation and all the hard work of the community task force members. Within the following slides, we'll review the process we went through and the takeaways of that task force and how that developed that criteria, which helped drive their recommendation. So again, we wanted to understand, we didn't want to start with a bunch of solutions, because if we had a bunch of solutions, then how do we know we're solving it? So we wanted to start really with criteria. What are the biggest things we want to achieve, and what are the parameters that we should work in order to achieve that? So once we started with some of those items, then we were able to develop some of the options, of which we'll review some of the options that we are not recommending, as well as the option we are recommending. And that criteria really allowed us to evaluate if we were meeting the goals of the community task force. So again, this is the foundation of our decision making with these criteria. So we started out, the district, we did do a presentation on the strategic vision of the district with the Forward 2024. And the community task force did believe in that and believe that the facilities should support those 2024 goals. And the 3 bullet points below that are direct quotes out of your strategic plan. Next, it was really provide equitable spaces between the facilities to the greatest extent possible is a priority. Facilities should bolster the successful and current and future programs within the Yankton schools, and I think Ron just mentioned that too. You guys have a lot of good things going and a lot of good programming happening, and students are happy and staff are happy, and we should just make sure we're building a facility around that. Our project should be accomplished within the budgeted capital certificates. When entering a facility, it should identify as a Yankton school, so that was just a little bit about the district pride. And all elementary facilities should incorporate secure vestibules, so just touching on some of the safety and security goals. New elementary school facilities should be strongly considered that provide space for all current and future successful programs and services to the Yankton School District. A new early childhood facility will support growth throughout the district. Facility and site of a new facility should be sized for potential flexibility, potential opportunities of growth within the district, as well as enhancing some of the community partnerships. Facilities and site amenities should support appropriate scale for our littlest learners of that early childhood. Some of the comments that, and even throughout some of the tours that the members went on at Webster, is that building, it wasn't built necessarily for 3-year-olds, and that there's some better features that we could incorporate for those small hands, small legs. Let's see. The group supported the fact that the early childhood, our preschool programming should be in conjunction with junior K. And to further on that, kindergarten should be part of the early childhood with the junior K, because there is a lot of synergy not only between the students between junior K and kindergarten, but as well as the staff.
Val, can I interrupt for a minute? I don't think we're off on the
Am I
slides
off
a
on-
little bit. Can we back up and get back on track with the slides to make sure that people can follow along? Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'll just give a moment here to read through them. All right, so then once we started to really talk about solutions and options, that's when we started talking a little bit about Webster. So this is still one of our criteria statements, but it was important for everybody to understand where the group landed about Webster. Webster is your second oldest facility. However, the group felt that essentially it should not be invested in for a couple of reasons. One of the biggest reasons is that it is part of a floodplain. And will be likely recategorized as the floodplain changes by other bureaucracies that control that. What that means as part of a floodplain is some of the solutions would have to be pretty unique. We would have to spend different type of solutions to make them compatible with the floodplain requirements. Building in a floodplain can be present some challenges, such as you have to build the floors elevated, which would likely add another level to Webster, even if it is just a couple feet different. And that also has a financial impact. So we talked a little bit about the age of the facility. The adjacency to the creek is not necessarily ideal, specifically when the water does start to rise. It happens pretty instantaneously. The last instance of this happening, the students showed up at school and the creek was fine, and within a couple of hours it was at a stage where the building had to be, where students had to be released early for the day. We talked about how it is multi-level, and that's not really the most conducive to our small learners, as well as it not having any accessibility, any elevators to go to those those floors. We talked about how the existing site is very small and limited. It would be pretty difficult to add on square footage onto this site too, because it is small. And then we talked about how the site congestion and even the roads outside of it are really congested, and that this is one of the sites that has some of the more frenzied pickup and drop-off time between parents and buses. So based on these factors, it's the committee's recommendation that no additional investment at Webster Elementary is to happen. Throughout our option development, which I'll get into next, we then discussed Beetle. So some of the items where the group felt that Beetle had some limiting factors on is it is the oldest building in your district. Likely by the time if any solutions were put into place, the building would be over 100 years old. It's multi-level without accessibility. The existing site also has limitations, and it has the most deferred maintenance needs in terms of both costs and the list. It's one of the more, it's the building that requires the most attention from your Buildings and Grounds Department. So we started talking a little bit about how both Webster and Beetle should not be invested in for the future. And that kind of led the group into discussions about what happens to those facilities. At this time, the group did not make any recommendations because that will really present itself at the time that that's appropriate, and there will be different opportunities between our last meeting and when that time occurs. However, they did really believe that consideration of the board or the administration at the time that that is to occur is to be given that has a positive impact for the Yankton community. Any questions on those criteria? With that, I'd like to invite another community member up, Lydia Wentworth, to share some of her experiences.
Good evening. My name is Lydia Wentworth. I am a preschool teacher at Webster, as well as a parent of 2 children in the system. When I was asked to be on the Facilities Committee, I was excited for the opportunity to be part of the decisions that would impact the future of our elementary schools. It became clear early on that in our meetings that the early childhood programs would be the main focus. Yankton is very fortunate to have a public school system that values early childhood education and making it available to all. These programs have evolved and grown over the years, and it is projected that that growth will continue. This committee took into consideration all of the elementary buildings, students, and families, and how we could best suit the needs of everyone, with an emphasis on our earliest learners. We explored and discussed at great length several options for the future of the elementary facilities, and I'm excited to share the option that our group felt was the best for Yankton.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about our options that we developed as we went through our meetings. So we lovingly and caringly identified, and I suppose creatively, identified these as options A, B, C, D, and then E 2.0. So option A, basically our overview for option A is that we would invest at Lincoln, Stewart, and Beetle, and that means remodel the facility and add the associated capacity additions, and create a new district-wide early childhood through kindergarten center that would allow you to close Webster. Option B was to close Beetle, relocate the early childhood center to Stewart Elementary, invest with additions at Lincoln, and create a new district-wide district-wide kindergarten center with a 6-section 1 through 5 school. Option C was to close Webster, demo and rebuild Beetle at the Beetle site, invest it with additions and remodeling at Lincoln and Stewart, and create a new district-wide early childhood through K. And then finally, option D was to close Webster and Beetle, invest at Lincoln and Stewart to create both of those as 3-section 1 through 5 facilities, and create a new district-wide early childhood through kindergarten with 3 sections of 1 through 5. So that option includes adding 1 through 5 at the new facility. In the end, our recommended option was E 2.0, and we'll get into those. So I just wanted to share this graphic with you. This graphic is highly familiar to our task force members, but it basically just kind of represents your buildings as simple boxes. This was a way to show some of the flow of the options and how it would all work out, just kind of with an easy visual. So we just start out with today's condition of Beetle, Lincoln, Stewart, and Webster. Those are the letters. And then their current sizes are listed below that. So the scenario A included a new early childhood through K building to replace Webster. It proposed additions for correcting capacity and educational adequacy at your 3 remaining elementaries, which was Lincoln, Stewart, and Beetle. Throughout this conversation, that's really when the conversation arose of why are we investing in Beetle? It doesn't seem prudent to invest that much money at Beetle to fix up what is there and then add the necessary infrastructure to make it accessible. So with that, that's really where the criteria about Beetle came into play, was after reviewing option A. Next option, which was option B, the group came up with option B was developed to create a new district-wide kindergarten in a 3-section 1 through 5. This would combine your 3 sections at Beetle and allow the 1 section from Webster to be provided at the new elementary school. This relocated your early childhood programming to Stewart Elementary. To allow for Stewart. Sorry about that, I lost my train of thought. The new elementary school would essentially have 9 sections or 10 sections of kindergarten and 6 sections of 1 through 5. Ultimately, the group felt that from a facility standpoint, Stewart is one of your best functioning elementary schools. And kind of why break it? Why should we break it to put in early childhood when it functions really well as an elementary school facility? So the group ended up not preferring this option because of that. This option also does not allow the synergy of junior K and kindergarten being in the same facility. Next, we looked at scenario C. This was evolved with the group's strong feelings that the amount of investment needed at existing Beetle was too much for the payback that you would receive. This option explored if it was possible to rebuild Beetle Elementary School with the correct size elementary facility with the proper amenities needed for today's educational delivery methods. So the initial step of scenario C was to build a new early childhood and district-wide kindergarten center. The next phase was to build a new facility on Beetle. So in order to do that, the existing Beetle would have to be closed, and then the students would temporarily relocate to Webster because all of the Webster kids relocated to the new facility. This would likely be a transition plan for up to 2 years while the new school is being built on the existing Beetle site. So one of the challenges with this, however, is to, again, build a new facility with today's educational standards and sizes. It doesn't fit very well on your existing Beetle site. So the group thought long and hard on this option. They really explored the positive of keeping an elementary school at the Beetle site. However, they wanted to think about, is this logical? Would the community really resonate with this type of idea? Again, I think I believe the task force believed that this was creating too cramped of a site if we tried to make it feasible, and it's not solving any of the parent and bus commotion that is on the streets. It would still rely heavily on staff parking, visitor parking to happen on the streets and not within its site. Also, the group felt that this was too many steps and too many phases, including the temporary phase of relocating the current Beetle kids to Webster for a couple years and then back to the new facility. It kind of relies on too many pieces and too many chess moves to fall strategically. So the group ultimately did not recommend this option. This option also did not fall within the budgeted capital certificate expenditure of the district too, in order to initiate the initial phase. Lastly, it was scenario D. So what scenario D did accomplish criteria by divesting in Webster and Beetle, and it did so by creating a new facility to hold district-wide early childhood with kindergarten and then 3 sections of 1 through 5 for when Beadle was closed. Scenario D included educational adequacy and capacity additions to right-size Stewart and Lincoln. This option helped identify synergies as it was getting close to where the group found consensus. So, however, what the group struggled with was not providing enough flexibility for grade reconfigurations to leave that really flexible for the future years and for the future of Yankton School District. The other comment that the group had about this option was they felt that the facility may be too large by the time that it was created from a student capacity standpoint. Any questions on those options that are not recommended but reviewed by the group?
Val, I don't have a question, but if you would go back to slide 33. The scenarios that we looked at, they show a lot of information in a short amount of time. So I think it would be good just to recap with this slide again. If you just walk through, again, the 4 options here that the committee recommended against, just to kind of recap what we just saw.
Yep, sure. So option A was to invest with additions for capacity and educational adequacy at Lincoln, Stewart, and Beadle. It would close Webster in favor of creating a new district-wide early childhood through kindergarten center. Option B is to close Beadle, relocate early childhood to Stewart Elementary, add additions to Lincoln Elementary School, and this is a typo. It really should say create a new district-wide kindergarten building with 6 sections of 1st through 5th grade. So all of the kindergartners would be removed out of Lincoln and Beadle and go to the new facility. Option C is to close Webster and demo and rebuild Beadle on Beadle, causing the students to temporarily relocate to Webster because they will be in the new early childhood facility. This would mean adding on to Stewart and Lincoln for capacity. And then option D was to close Webster and Beadle, invest at Lincoln and Stewart so that they both could be 3-section, 1st through 5th grade, and have a new district-wide early childhood through kindergarten with 3 sections of 1 through 5. So you would end up with 3 facilities of 3 sections, 1 through 5. Any questions? Okay. All right, so this will lead us to our master plan task force recommendation, which we named option E 2.0. So option E 2.0 kind of has a couple of steps. So the first step we're calling phase 1, and that's building a new early childhood through kindergarten center. Again, the group really strongly supported that in early childhood with preschool, junior K, and kindergarten should all be at one facility, and this will alleviate the Webster facility from the district. The next steps are to invest at Lincoln and Stewart so that they both become grades 2 through 5, because we would add on to your new early childhood kindergarten facility with 1st grade. This would allow Beadle to be closed because we would be offloading some of the 1st grade capacity at Lincoln and Stewart into the new facility, and it would allow the divestment of Beadle Elementary School. So again, how do we get this? So this is a master plan. We understand that not all of these steps will happen at once, and I want you to be clear with that. The immediate action that the group felt was needed is what is called Phase 1. That's, again, building that new early childhood through kindergarten center. That will allow Webster to be closed, and the one section of 1 through 5 will move to Stewart Elementary School. Stewart Elementary School will free up some rooms. They'll free up 2 classrooms because their kindergarten is moving to the district-wide kindergarten center. And then also they will be the special education programming for the preschoolers will be moving out and moving into that new facility. The next steps, which can happen in a multiple number of steps, I think the group really liked the flexibility that the next steps provided. It was not all in at the same time. It could be undertaken at different times. So the next steps include a first grade addition at that early childhood through kindergarten center. Again, that would allow you to close Beetle. This would require projects at Lincoln and Stewart Elementary School for capacity and educational adequacy. Let's see. And then also to support relocating Beetle. This gives the district some flexibility for future grade configurations, which we'll go into on the next slides. So again, a little bit of the pictorial. Oh, now my clicker, oh, there we go. Pictorial of it is that in the very end, after the very end of the master plan, Lincoln Elementary School could be a 5-section intermediate school, grades 2 through 5. So would Stewart Elementary School be a 5-section, grades 2 through 5. Or they could be considered grade level learning centers where we just do 2 grades each. So that's really, the task force really liked how that provides some really future flexibility and opportunities. And then we would have our early childhood through 1st grade district-wide center. And again, how we get there, Phase 1, we have our existing buildings. I kind of clicked through that too fast. So we have our existing buildings here. We would build that new early childhood and district-wide kindergarten. That would allow our early childhood programming from Webster to move to the new facility, and our early childhood special ed to move out of Stewart to be with their peers at the new center. We would move all of the kindergarten from the 4 buildings into the new district-wide kindergarten center. And then grades 1 through 5 from Webster would move into Stewart. So what that means is that we repurpose up to 5 classrooms at Stewart that were 2 former kindergarten classrooms and 3 special ed rooms to repurpose those for our 1st through 5th graders from Webster. This also frees up space at both Beetle and Lincoln because we took out 3 classrooms worth of kindergarten, and that would be able to achieve some makerspace programming, some space to offset some of the student support and special ed rooms that are needed for the facilities right now. So this would allow some square footage to be flexible and to be used by the building and the district to achieve some of those special programming and programmatic goals. So, and then at the end, this is kind of what it would look like of Phase 1 again. All right, so then we got into our next steps that happen out in the future. Our next steps can be completed, as I mentioned, as a single phase or all grouped together as one bigger initiative. So what our next steps will include, again, we have our little boxes to represent our different buildings. You'll see Webster is missing because we closed that with our new early childhood kindergarten center. So to begin with, we will start by adding our 1st grade capacity addition to the newer facility. This will relocate all of 1st grade from Beetle, Lincoln, and Stewart. And then again, I also wanted to point out that the group felt very strongly that our additions include for 10 sections. So our new early childhood and kindergarten facility includes for 10 sections of kindergarten and 10 sections of first grade. So that's growing that capacity by 1. All right, so once that addition is built, what that allows us to do is to do some remodeling and capacity additions at both Lincoln and Stewart Elementary School. Then we can relocate students from Beetle to Lincoln and Stewart, our grades 2 through 5, because again, we created first grade at the new facility. Then we are able to decommission Beetle Elementary School. All this time, it was the task force was very adamant that we consider the new facility to be allowed to have additions onto it for community partnerships or perhaps daycare partnerships that the district undertakes in the future. So what that leaves us with is having Lincoln Elementary School and Stewart Elementary Schools as what I would call intermediate schools, grades 2 through 5. And then creating a new early childhood and primary school with grades K and 1. And then what that will do, as well as it'll provide 5 sections of grades 2 through 5 at 2 buildings, which means that's a total of 10 sections for grades 2 through 5, and a new facility has 10 sections of kindergarten and first grade. So that means district, from an elementary school standpoint, you have grown into a 10-section district for grades 1 through 5. Our options also did include growth for early childhood, for preschool and junior K, just so you guys understand that. So to recap, our phase 1 takeaways, which was the first step, this supports the district's immediate goal to provide a new early childhood facility and solution. The desire of an early childhood through first grade is really the recommendation of the task force because of work that those age groups and those staff groups can do together. However, to stay within some of the fiscal parameters that the district has, the group wants to begin with that early childhood through kindergarten first. So this approach, it provides maximized flexibility for that future grade restructuring if desired, but it gives the opportunity for it. And Beetle Elementary School, again, should not be part of a long-term solution within the district, was one of the criterias from the task force. And then if we move K out of buildings, again, it provides space for those programmatic goals of makerspace and supporting some of that special programming of student services and special education. And really, another big goal this accomplishes is providing the preschool special education with the preschool students and the rest of the preschool programming. I will take questions, but I think before I get to questions, I would like to invite up a few more members and hear some of their voices. So Jacqueline Mueller, Kate Schramm, if you guys want to come up.
Hello. When I was asked to join the Early Childhood and Elementaries Facilities Task Force, I had a lot of reservations and preconceived notions. I certainly have a passion for and vested interest in our school district, having grown up here, witnessed and taught in other school districts in other states, and now returning so that my child can be part of YSD. Still, I was nervous. I was nervous that I was too attached to see clearly. I was nervous that I would be in a position where I would be asked to advocate for a controversial decision. And I was nervous that I would put my foot in my mouth at some point during the committee meetings because I am not shy, but my thoughts often come across much better if I write them down. Instead of my worst fears coming true, I witnessed something completely opposite. My attachment to this school district gave me the love and the grit to tackle tough conversations. The decisions that went into our ultimate recommendation were so thoroughly discussed, debated, and examined that the logic and responsibility to our future generations far outweighs any controversial side of this decision. Furthermore, this committee was composed of a diverse cross-section of individuals willing to share their perspectives and respect the perspectives of others. Ultimately, if our recommendation is accepted, I will shed some tears to see Webster decommissioned. I went to Webster. My son will start preschool there next year, and we live near that school building. But this decision does not take away the memories, love, and formation that came from that building. It mitigates a safety and financial risk that the building faces and that our children face. The decision to eventually examine the decommissioning of Beetle does not mean that this building has no merit and that it has not and is not currently providing an excellent place for our children to learn and grow. No, the recommendation does not discredit or demerit anything past or present. The recommendation says that our committee believes that Yankton's children deserve the best that we can offer, and that we are willing to make the hard decisions where safety and long-term fiscal responsibility are concerned. The proposed plan also means our children will be immersed in spaces designed specifically with their developmental milestones in mind, surroundings that bolster creativity, and classroom structures that could allow our fabulous educators to explore curriculum development in new ways. While nothing about this process was easy, I can assure you that all of my skepticism has been erased, and I know in my heart and in my head that the committee's recommendation is sound and is the best option.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Mueller. I have 2 children that are in the school district currently. I have one at Beetle. I also have one in the early childhood program at Webster currently. As far as I can say, just for what exists right now for the early childhood program, I couldn't ask for anything better. The administration, the staff, the teachers, everyone that's involved in the early childhood program has been such a blessing to myself and my family, as well as to everyone else in the community that I've discussed this whole process with. So that being said, what we have currently is wonderful, and I think what would truly benefit the community to the best of its ability is being able to build on that, to continue to add and to allow Yankton to grow into this wonderful community that it is. My husband and I came back to Yankton for the purpose of raising our children here. I did not get the opportunity to go to school in Yankton County. However, my husband did, and he speaks very, very highly of it and wouldn't trade it for the world. So once that became something that was on our hearts and in our mind as to where we wanted to raise our children, instantly it was Yankton. I grew up in bigger schools, so moving to Yankton was a little bit of an adjustment for me. However, it has been an absolute blessing. Going on into the future and leaving what is currently happening in our community, which is all wonderful and great, moving into the future, I do feel that the early childhood facility, being able to accommodate the special ed program for the preschoolers and as well as kindergarten would be a great benefit to the community. It'll allow the other elementary schools to be added onto and to grow. As we're getting rid of buildings, it feels like maybe we're not accomplishing the existing goal. However, through the whole process with Val and discussing design and possibilities and all the other existing options, A through D, we have come to the conclusion that truly to continue to grow Yankton's school district to the best it can possibly be for our population and for our little kids out there is to actually close 2 of the existing schools in the long run. It's been a great opportunity to be a part of this committee. As mentioned before, there was a lot of tough discussions. However, it truly did have a wonderful impact on me and getting to know other people within the community, and also being able to work through some of these issues while still continuing to respect everyone's opinions and feelings and attachments that we do have to existing historical buildings in town. So that being said, I just hope that we're able to look forward and continue to grow this wonderful program into the future. And I feel like we really did put in time and effort to really think about not just the early childhood program, but also all the other children within the other elementary schools as well, and try to figure out the absolute best option in supporting our elementary schools in Yankton County. Thank you.
All right, so one last recap. The major goals of Phase 1 is to build a new early childhood and kindergarten center district-wide, provide early childhood and special education at the early childhood kindergarten building, and provide space relief at Beadle, Lincoln, and Stewart because the former kindergarten classrooms have been removed, so that will free up some space. And within Phase 1, Webster is decommissioned. Then the future steps, again, how you undertake them is up to the board or up to the administration at that time. But it would include adding a first grade addition to the early childhood and kindergarten facility, and creating some capacity and educational adequacy and ADA changes to Lincoln and Stewart. This will allow Beadle to be decommissioned. So this is how the task force looked at kind of your next 10 years. Your immediate needs as well as those next 10 years. I will pause for questions, and I hope you understand that I've tried to condense 7 meetings and over 15 hours worth of committee work in under an hour, so.
Val, would you explain to everybody, including me, why would you wait for that first grade edition in the new early childhood K building rather than doing that right away?
Ultimately, that is the task force recommendation. However, the cost of creating that first grade portion of the facility kind of pushes the financial boundaries that were kind of established for that task force's consideration. So that's why it was shifted into a future step. That might be a good segue to talk about money. So we'll start to review some of the estimates. So our what we took into consideration, we did quite a few scenarios. We called them best practices and bare minimums when it comes to building that new early childhood facility. So best practices is really we worked with all of the principals to understand, here's your classroom sizes now. What should we be planning for your new facility, your new classrooms, and understanding what is really the best practices in today's educational market and expectations. And then the bare minimum was, hey, just to close Webster, what we really need to do, just to close Webster and get our early childhood programming in one building, that means we need to move one kindergarten and then our Stewart Elementary School kindergarten class over. So that was the bare minimum approach. So when it comes to estimating how much does a new facility cost, it really boils down to the square footage. So we talked about kind of every space in a new facility, the classrooms, the offices, the special ed rooms, the gym, the media center, and making sure all of those spaces were adequately sized for today's standards. So within the budgetary bounds of the capital outlay, first grade would have to be removed from our immediate Phase 1. So estimates for the new early childhood through kindergarten facility ranged between $17.6 million and $20.6 million. These estimates do fall within the capital certificate range of the district budget, and these buildings do include 1 year of inflation. And then lastly, additional dollars are being budgeted for land purchase, utilities, and other additional expenses needed to complete phase 1. So to start out with, I just want to explain some of these program requirements. So again, the bare minimum includes 4 kindergarten rooms. 1 is from Webster, 2 is from Stewart, and number 4 is your growth. So that way you'll have 10 kindergarten rooms in your district. And then that includes your early childhood. So that would be about a 61,000 square foot building. Next was the best practices. Designing the proper sized classrooms and the proper amount of classrooms for the students it's going to serve. That would include early childhood of 9 rooms, which again is 1 more room than you have today, and 10 kindergarten classrooms, so that also has 1 room of growth in it. That would be a 68,500 square foot building. And lastly, we called it best practice plus core. Since the group felt really strongly that this should be an early childhood through first grade center, we should make sure the core spaces are designed for those future 10 sections of first graders. And what core spaces are is the media center and the cafeteria, and making sure the kitchen can cook enough food for the additional 10 classes of first grade and their students. So instead of building smaller little media center additions and cafeteria additions when that first grade is onboarded, the group wanted to see a number that included that core spaces included in the original build, which would be 73,000 square feet. What we'll get to next is understanding that what the group kind of studied next was that the very bottom number, the square footage per student. So if we did the bare minimum, that's about 209 square feet per student, which is very inefficient, frankly, for a building of this size and what it's doing. So what it means is when you would walk through the facility would feel kind of empty because you don't have enough students to fully schedule the gym. So the gym would look really empty, and so would the media center. Those type of spaces would look inefficient. Best practices had a higher efficiency rate of 159 square feet per student. And then the best practice in core, we're at about 170. You lose a little bit of efficiency because, again, you're overbuilding your media center and overbuilding your cafeteria for that future first grade population. A goal for you guys would likely be around that 150 to 165 square feet a student at this size. So the best practices falls into with that, and the best practices plus core is a little bit of a stretch, but it's understandable because you're intentionally overbuilding it so that when you do need to build your first grade addition, you're not disrupting the cafeteria activities or the kitchen activities or the media center activities from those kindergarten and junior K classrooms that actually need those spaces. So with that, I'm going to have Keith present some of the values of these.
You clicking? Going the right way here. Okay. I think to back up to our facilities conditions assessment of the existing schools, we didn't get into a lot of detail on the numbers, but to recap, between the 4 existing schools, we identified about $11 million in investment just to bring those up to current code and accessibility standards. So while $20 million looks like a big number, the 10 plus million that you'd have to invest in the existing schools just to get them sprinklered, add elevators at Beadle and Webster, improve the grounds, address the maintenance items that are already budgeted. All of that adds up to a significant number and doesn't really address your curriculum and educational goals. And we know that over the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen unprecedented cost increases in the construction industry. So that's just part of the reality of where we are. And we've addressed that to the extent we can, looking forward 1 year with these numbers. But again, that $20 million number, the district is in such a good spot financially that this project is achievable. without any new taxes. I think that's going to be an important story to tell your constituents. So if there's any other questions on the existing schools, cost estimates, or the new school, I'm happy to take those.
And I think mine is just a clarification. So back to that slide that it was just on with the 3 there. So the best practice plus core for the additional almost $1 million, we're just anticipating the addition of the first grade coming on, but we're not building for that first grade to be there. It would still be another project a year or two down the line that would add on that addition.
Exactly, yep. So all the core spaces are there, and we would just add the 10 rooms plus some support spaces to bring the first grade over.
So then, is there a number out there that tells me if I did it all at once, I'm looking in my head for the return on my investment versus my cost of waiting. Is there any kind of calculation that shows me if we did it all at once, it's 20x million versus
Sure.
us having an additional $10 million addition by not doing that one right away? I'm just trying to see if there was a cost evaluation there.
Sure. We did a quick look, in the 10-room addition with support spaces, about 20,000 square feet. That's a big number. We think is about $5 million, escalated out 3 years. So that's accounting for about 5% cost escalation per year. So we think that's going to continue for a while at least. So the more years you wait, you just add 5% every year. And if you were able to do that sooner, you could subtract 5% per year that you're able to move that project up, budgeting-wise.
I know this, but because I was there, but just for the sake of everybody else, what is the acreage requirements for the best practice plus core? As far as you know, as far as the building site's concerned.
So we still want to account for the first grade and the community partnership space, not knowing exactly what it is, but we've said 15 acres as a site size.
So the $20.6 million price tag, or the 19.7, does that include some of the things that you are going to fix, like in Stewart, or is that coming out of our existing budget?
This phase does not include any money spent at Lincoln and Stewart and Beetle. That they would just be kind of offloading some of those kindergarten rooms, and that other services and programming could just move into them as is. Did it? No. I know I spoke a little bit about efficiency, number of students per square foot. Once that first grade addition is built on, you would be functioning at about 145 square feet a student, which is really a sweet spot for a facility of that size with that number of students.
Does anybody have any questions from the crowd? Do we have a mic?
Okay. I think currently all of the meals come from the high school and get delivered to the elementary schools. Is that correct? Does anybody know? I think that's correct. So if we had a prep kitchen at the new Best Practice Plus Core, will we be changing our lunch program and doing lunches at the school site? Is that something that we're looking into as well, changing some of our infrastructure
Val, do you want to stay at the mic? Yeah. Thank you. Just to the first part of your question, yes, we prepare food at the middle school and high school on site, and then our elementary schools, those meals are delivered, and there's, I guess you'd call it mini kitchen service areas for those meals. But to your question regarding where we would move in the future, I'll let Val address that.
Okay. That was one of the considerations of the best practices plus core, was likely at a facility that size with 10 kindergartners, 10 first graders, as well as junior K, that a facility that size should likely have a full service kitchen. Other questions?
Does that answer your question regarding the new facility, that it would have its own kitchen? And for the existing elementary schools, we would be doing what we do now for school lunch services.
Does anyone else have any questions for Val? I would just like to take a minute to thank everybody on the committee and all the time and effort that everyone put into this, because having you guys come speak and kind of speak to all the emotions and debates that went on really means a lot more than just a PowerPoint. And so I'd like to thank the people that are here and everyone else who put their time into it, because I know it was a time-intensive experience.
I'd like to say, too, that I really encourage the public to input on this as best as possible. The committee did an awesome job going through the whole process, and I want to thank Val and for the way she facilitated this process. But also, please, community, get involved in this whole aspect. I want to direct you to the open house on April 19th. So the more you can really, the more input you've got, the more information you've got, the more you can tell us about this plan, the better informed we are, and the better decision we can make on May 9th.
The other thing that I'd like to add, and I know that we went over it on one of the slides, and I think it was maybe the slide before this, but I think it's really important for everybody to know, again, that the reason we started this process and we spent so much time on it, again, was that we had over 1,000 people that filled out surveys, which really has guided our Forward 2024 plan. And part of that plan, again, was to look at our facilities, and in particular our elementary school facilities, and with a focus on our early childhood and early special ed programs. And so that's important to us. It was important to you, to our community, and we want to make sure that we follow up with that. And then additionally, I know for a lot of people out there, one of the things that people are going to want to know, obviously, is the cost, and we kind of went through that tonight. But also, how is that going to get paid for? If we have a new early childhood development center, how are we going to pay for it? And I would tell you that we have spent the last several years working very hard in our capital outlay, and we have taken care of our facilities. We have planned for this day coming that we would take a look at an early childhood development center. We have been budgeting money in our capital outlay so that when the time comes that we could issue capital outlay certificates, which does not require any kind of tax increase. We would use the money that we currently have in capital outlay to finance this early child development center. So I'd like to thank the school board members here and our community members and our community in general for allowing us that opportunity to be looking at this possibility for our kids. I think it's good for Yankton. It's good for the development of our community. There's a lot tied to economic development here. We have new families moving. We need to move ahead. We need to plan ahead. We're growing as a district. We're growing as a community. This ties into workforce development. We mentioned a little bit here tonight that, you know, perhaps there could be a partnership with some kind of daycare facility. We know that we've heard that quite clearly in the community, that that is a concern, that there's not enough daycare. We have some tremendous daycare here in Yankton, but it doesn't seem to be enough. And so part of our role here as a school is to make sure that we collaborate with our community and our large employers, our small employers, to make sure that we provide a great education. And as Ron Birch said earlier, that teachers are what really make the difference. And in addition to our teachers, you need to have good facilities. And many years ago, a lot of people stepped forward in this community and they provided our kids with excellent facilities. And our staff have taken care of our facilities, but they're also reaching a point where we need to do something different, and that's what's being proposed here tonight. So again, as Mr. Crandall said, and our other board members, we thank everybody. And on your slide, if you can see it, our next meeting will be held on April 19th at 6 o'clock right here in the high school theater. It will not be a school board meeting. It's a public, open community meeting to learn more about this. We'll repeat many of the things that we did here tonight, but we'll certainly welcome people to have some additional dialogue. So again, thank you for everybody that has participated, and we welcome you to come back on the 18th, or the 19th, excuse me. Thank you.
That concludes the presentation portion. Does anybody have any other questions or comments they'd like to make? Make a motion to adjourn. Roll call, Jason.
Greenaway? Crandall? Sarda?
Yes.
Kiefer?
Yes.
Sternquist?
Yes.